Hi there, esteemed audience, and welcome to another episode of the Middle Grade Ninja Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Kent, and I've got good news and I've got some bad news. The good news is I've got two new books available. The first of which is Rob Worm's Bird Adventure. I wrote the first draft of Rob's story when I was 11 years old and in the fifth grade. That version is included with the new edition, complete with full illustrations by 11-year-old me. I have been rethinking and rewriting that story ever since through many, many different variations. At one point, it was a template for the Banneker Bones trilogy. It has been through a lot of changes, but I'm most excited about this version that's available to you now. Rob is an adventure-seeking worm. He burrows to the surface with his bunch on a rainy spring morning, just to be swooped up by a passing robin. She carries him way up into the sky, but not to worry, he wriggles free, only to land on the roof of a human house. How's he going to get down? And if he does, he's surrounded by nasty yellow jackets, a sizzling hot driveway, colonies of warring ants, a giant spider. There's a whole pond full of worm-hungry koi. When you're a worm, almost everything in your average human backyard is out to eat you, so Rob's got his work cut out for him. It's an exciting, action-packed story that I also think is a little bit funny. I hope that you'll check that out. My other novel is Goodbye to Grandma, and that one is about sixth grader Haley Smith, who comes of age by coming to terms with the death of her grandmother. It is my most personal story. When I was in the sixth grade, my grandmother died, and I was unable to cry at her funeral. It took me a very long time to process my grief, and since I'm publishing this book now, some would say I'm still processing it. I hope that you'll check out both of those books. I hope you'll enjoy them. I hope that you'll feel compelled to write a review, help me promote them in any way that you can. That would mean the world to me. So that's the good news. Two new books available for you right now. The less good news is that my personal circumstances have changed in such a way that I am not going to be able to continue hosting the Middle Grade Ninja podcast. It has been one of the great thrills of my life to have chatted with so many amazing guests. I can't believe the people I've had the opportunity to sit down and talk with. I have learned so much about writing, publishing, life, and I hope you've learned some things as well. I hope the show has been helpful to you, esteemed audience. I couldn't have done it without you, and I so appreciate your support through the years as we've done this. I don't know if or when I'll be able to come back to the show. It's my hope that someday that I will. But in the meantime, I want to offer my most sincere thank you to you and to everyone who has been a part of this show and just the incredible experience it's been. We're going to go up to episode 212, and then after that, there will not be any additional episodes for at least a while. But stay subscribed to the feed. Hopefully at some point I'll be able to come back to you. If not to host a regular podcast, I'll at least have some updates for you about some other things I may be working on. Also keep an eye on middlegradeninja.com. Every week I end the show with God willing I'm alive. I'll see you next week. But today I'll just say, God willing I'm alive. I hope to see you soon. I couldn't be more excited. We have the incredible good fortune. We're going to be talking with Yarrow and Carrie Cheney, who are with us, and we're going to talk about their new book, SUPERWORLD. So welcome, Carrie and Yarrow.
Hello. Thank you. We're thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Coming to you from California, the other end of the country.
So esteemed audience knows that I never torture my guests by making them sit through me stumbling over their biography or their books. I'll get it wrong and you'll know I got it wrong and we'll just sit here and it'll be awkward. So rather than do that, please give esteemed audience an overview of your background. And Carrie, why don't we start with you?
Okay. We're both from Southern California. And I grew up in San Diego County. Yarrow grew up in Ventura County. So we're
where we live right now,
the lower part of California. And we met in 1992 as freshmen at California Institute of the Arts. We both grew up with this dream of being animators. And so once upon a time, right before our program started in school, I was sitting in a 2-student cubicle in the animation department, getting ready to chase my dream, and this 19-year-old Luke Skywalker guy walked in and I said, "Hi, I'm Carrie." And he said, "Hi, I'm Yarrow." I said, "I'm sorry, what? What's your name?" And he said, "Oh, it's an herb." And it took a few months for me to find out he's a flower.
Yeah, my parents were hippies, and so I was their firstborn.
Yep.
And so they gave me the name of a little yellow flower.
So he's a flower child, literally.
Right, yeah.
We got to know each other kind of immediately in our cubicle, and we just bonded from the get-go. And we started a collaboration that has stuck around till today.
Yeah. So at CalArts, we, all of the students make their own films. Every single year they do. You have a freshman film and then a sophomore film and so on. And so because we were cubicle mates, and so that's another sort of particular about this school, is that the students all have their own cubicles, because there's a lot of when you're learning how to animate, and back then it was all hand drawn. And so
we're old school.
Yeah, right. And so there's just, putting in the hours of drawing and at your desk. And so we started actually helping each other do our assignments together and helping each other with our student films. And so that was kind of the genesis of, us, just kind of working together. Just our relationship is working on creative content together. So
yeah, so we went through school together. We ended up being roommates, and we got out of school and got hired at the same animation studio at Turner Feature Animation. So we were like living the dream, and we ended up in offices next door to each other on the same movie.
Yeah.
And so once again,
this little movie, our first film was this little animated films. None of them are little, but it was this film called Cats Don't Dance. And so probably not a lot of people know, in your audience know, but I'm sure there are a few out there.
There might be a few fans.
We just loved it. It was such a wonderful film.
Yeah,
and,
it was a musical based on, like early Hollywood, and Scott Bakula is the main character, song and dance man.
The animation style is really sort of kind of almost more Warner Brothers, like cartoon, very sort of pushed and very fun animation. And so that was our first our first sort of like entry into animation, which our professional animation. So we just loved that.
And then we worked at Warner Brothers, and then we had our own business for a little while, a small company, and we were just friends. So important to know,
just like buddies through the whole time.
Yeah, that we were friends. We were best
Although
friends.
I was a little bit more like I had designs on other things. I was kind of infatuated, so I was in hot pursuit for years.
And long suffering, very patient. But we were roommates and best friends and business partners and all of that for 10 years. And then we finally went on one date, and we're like, well, we should just get married. And so within 3 months we got married.
Yeah.
And now we've been married 20 years.
Yeah.
So for a decade, you're just Mulder and Scully. Will they, won't they?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we were very confusing to all of our friends.
They thought we were a couple.
Because we did everything together. We would spend holidays together. And so
he's 4 years younger. It took me a while to get over that. Now I see the advantages of it. But at the time, it was like, I'm like, I can't, I can't turn 40 first. Like, no, like that's, but I did. Stupid math.
So, okay. So 10 years you're together. By the time you get together, it makes sense because you're already collaborators in every other aspect of your life. You've been roommates. You've worked together on your films. If you're still in touch with Scott Bakula or Mr. Bakula, if you're listening, the new Quantum Leap's pretty good. They need Sam. Get on there.
Nice.
So with that relationship, when you're working together, so many different questions. I know eventually you're going to go and you're going to make a film with Andy Griffith, I guess it's now called The Three Wise Men.
Yes, right.
Yes.
Yeah. So we had our own company together. We started doing like small things, like kind of show openings and for television and little bits of. Sometimes we would do if a show had like a big effects shot, we would kind of take that and do that and
For like the Dilbert TV series,
yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of thing.
And so we did a lot of this, and we had a little bit of success. We won an Emmy Award for the Dilbert television opening. And so we're like, hey, you know what? We are like kind of on a roll. And so we decided one thing to kind of back up a little bit. When we met, I think it was probably our first conversation. We were talking about things that we that inspired us growing up, animation and things like that. And we talked about the Christmas specials, the old, Christmas specials, the Rankin Bass Christmas specials, the Charlie Brown Christmas special, all these things
Grinch,
that
Santa Claus is coming to town.
Yeah, all these things that we grew up with, and we thought, we discussed, someday, why don't we make, and this is our first day, meeting, we should make one of those
Christmas specials
one day when we're out, doing the work professionally. And so fast forward, I don't know how many years, right?
7 years.
So yeah, so we're like, okay, we're doing pretty well. Let's start developing our Christmas special that we talked about years ago. And so we decided to sort of turn away work and kind of dedicate, which was, in hindsight, wasn't the best idea
financially.
Right. But yeah, and so we started developing this project about the first Christmas called The Three Wise Men. And well, you can Carrie's the historian, so she can.
Well, it ended up taking us 7 years, but we wrote it, and then eventually, it was starts and stops, trying to, maybe it should be a feature, maybe it should be a half an hour, like we just kept trying.
That was a really good learning experience for us, because we were very confident, very young, and like, we can do anything. And we started, writing this as with the idea that it would be a feature. And we ended up, sort of adding a lot to the story, and what we had at the end was just something that was just this kind of monstrosity that was like
gibberish,
Christmas related, but it was like, at a certain point we'd like added little ninjas.
Yeah, it was
like it was just, because it
had grown. It originally was supposed to be a half-hour special.
Yeah.
And then it's too much story. It should be an hour special. And then it was, well, why not just a feature then? And it took kind of all those iterations to fail and then come back to, why don't we go back to what it started as? And I said to Yarrow, I've always just wished it could rhyme like the Grinch. And we didn't have writing backgrounds. We come from visual backgrounds and storytelling, but I just said, I kind of want to see if I can write it as a poem. And he said, okay, like just try. And so suddenly I was just rhyming it, and all those other iterations and ninjas and all that led to a boiling down, like a reducing of the story that turned into the poem. And then I showed the poem to Yarrow, and he immediately picked up a pen and he thumbnail storyboarded everything. It was crazy. And that led to us saying, well, now we need a narrator. And if we're going to be like those old shows that we love from the 60s that we would wait to watch every single year, play once on television, we need that kind of narrator. And so we're like, who would that be now? Who would be the Burl Ives? Who would be the Fred Astaire now? And we're like, Andy Griffith. Like, Andy Griffith is that guy. And so we got together materials, and we were like, okay, it's just us, but we need to approach William Morris Agency and see if they'll show it to Andy Griffith. And they did. And next thing we know, he says yes. And we're flying out to North Carolina to meet him in person and record at his friend's home in a like converted room with a walk-in closet with quilts and stuff on the wall. We're like, nice to meet you, Andy Griffith. Like, and he's just in a chair as our narrator. It was the most amazing experience.
Yeah, and he was such a wonderful, like, natural, like, the guy was
amazingly
just
gifted.
Incredibly gifted in so many ways. He just did so many things, but just as a storyteller, he was able to take Carrie's writing and just kind of like sort of like put this personality into it that was just wonderful. And so
yeah, that was
and
amazing.
he was just wonderful to work with. So
that was kind of our first, that was basically was an independent project that took 7 years to make a 23-minute story.
Yeah. And we had the title, we had always talked about it being the Three Wise Men. Now that's the point of view that we were sort of following through the first Christmas. And when we ended up finishing it at Real Effects in Dallas, and all of their animation, their crew. And as we were finishing it, I think there was another feature animated film that was coming out the same year
in
Spain called The Three Wise Men. And so we had to change the name, and it became The Very First Noel, which was part one of from a line that was in the beginning of the project. And so it was called The Very First Noel for up until about 3 years ago, when they had did a sort of a re-release of it. We got the name back again. Basically, it was okay to sort of, because we weren't really competing head to head with anything.
Yeah, that was a very interesting thing, to lose our title after 7 years and have to start calling it something else. And then it has a history of that's all anyone else calls it. And then being told, well, do you want to rename it? And we're like, oh, we can go back to the original name. What a bizarre opportunity.
There was such clarity in it.
Yeah.
And then we obviously like the other the other title too, but there was such sort of clear, it was a clear, like, this is what it's about, everybody gets it. So anyway, so that's the
and then so basically we finished that, and Yarrow actually was shortly after we finished that in 2006. We spent a year trying to write a feature idea. We pitched that around town, like a sci-fi family film, animated. So we got a lot of writing and pitching experience, but we didn't sell it. And Yarrow picked up some freelance work as a production designer on what turned out to be Despicable Me. And so before we knew it, he just said, so they just, offered me the position on the film. The film's going to be made. And it was a secret. No one knew the film. It was Illumination's first film.
Yeah, it was the studio was very, very, it wasn't very new. It was the first movie, and they had actually, I started doing this concept work, and anybody, like, you probably know that in the entertainment business, it's like a lot of the earlier stuff, it's kind of hush hush. Like, you don't, go and tell, this is what it's all about, and here are all the characters. And so even like with us, I was doing this artwork, and they started to really respond to it. And they, called me in and said, hey, we want to offer you the production design job. And by the way, it's in Paris, France. Because I had no idea they were setting the project up over in Paris. And so I came out and told Carrie had driven me down to the
interview, like the meeting.
Yeah. So we could use the carpool lanes and all that. So I came out and said, okay, they want me to be a production designer, because I loved the project. Yeah. Like, it was, even at the early stages, it was just such a fun,
Minions.
Minions, right? This is even before they were a thing. Like, they were part of it, but the designs weren't there and all that. But and of course the voice and right. And so anyway, so they.
But you told me where.
So I said in Paris.
And I said Paris, Texas.
Right.
And you said no, the other one.
Well, because we didn't do a lot of traveling. I had been to Paris a couple of times for another project. I was production designer on the Curious George film. I'm sorry, the first Curious George film. And one of our studios was over in Paris. And so I'd been over there, and it was just wonderful. But we didn't really travel internationally.
On his trips, he would call me and say, someday I want to bring you here. And I'm like, yeah, that'll never happen. And then we moved there for 10 years.
Yeah, right. It was like that. It was all, a couple, I guess it was
3 months
later, but yeah. And then we were living there, put everything in storage. And
the funny thing was, there were about 10 Americans that moved over to make Despicable Me at Illumination, or at MacGuff in Paris, an animation studio. But we were the first two to go over, and knowing that I have never been anywhere and we don't speak French, we arrive on a Sunday in Paris on my birthday, and we're like, well, we should get food. And so we got hot dogs at the Eiffel Tower, because we're like, we don't know what to buy. Well, I know what a hot dog is.
We hold out our euros and get hot dog.
And then he went to work the next morning, and so he started in the studio with the French crew, who turned out to be amazing and just the coolest friends.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like the studio, you meeting the studio, like everything was new. Like all the people I had been working with in America, it was all freelance work. So I was working from my home, and we would like, back then we were probably doing Skype or whatever, to the director in New York, and it was mostly that, and maybe some people here, but all of a sudden there was this whole studio that I'm walking into, meeting people, and it was.
And they're all kissing him on the cheek.
That's right. Yeah, doing all the bees. So it was this amazing experience of like meeting all of these new people that I didn't know, but because we went over there thinking, okay, it's going to be about a year and a half, and then the film's going to be done, and we'll come back to America. We end up spending 10 years over there, and so Despicable Me became, everything started to go well, and we did the LORAX right after that. So I just moved right up onto that. It was very busy, because I was basically overlapping films. Like halfway through Despicable Me, we started LORAX, and so I was production designing LORAX at the same time, getting that ramped up while we were finishing Despicable Me, and then from that to Despicable Me 2, and then from that I started moving into directing, and so I co-directed The Secret Life of Pets. But that was starting over Despicable Me 2, and so it was very like, it was challenging, but it was also really cool to just constantly have this sort of constant stream of like creativity that you had to kind of produce and kind of go from film to film, that was a really big challenge. And so like take your Despicable Me brain out and put your
Grinch one
in, or Secret Life of Pets, depending on what meeting you're in, right? And so during the day, and so
part of the you did 5 films while we were over there, and in that time I was basically the equivalent of Lucille Ball in the Europe episodes of I Love Lucy, where basically like the stomping the grapes and any I was like the confused American in Paris. A lot of comedy, but he worked on a couple Dr. Seuss projects over there, the LORAX and the Grinch.
And the Grinch. So the last film that I did over there was the Grinch, and that came out in 2018.
And you would come home and say, basically working on adapting this amazing source material to film, because he'd also done Curious George.
Well, and actually it's funny, because we're just to prop up the computer. This is the Curious George book that I had. So one of the things that this wasn't planned. I didn't plant this under here to say like, oh, it's a problem. Anyway, this was the actual Curious George book that I used, and you can see all the like notes and things like that I have all throughout the book. And I guess like what Carrie is saying is that in doing these films that other authors have it's their baby. What I've always done is really tried to get into their heads, right? And so I've kind of studied their material, and especially like with Marguerite Nache-Ray's Curious George, but then 2 Dr. Seuss films. Like the first one I did, I was the production designer, and so of course trying to get into Dr. Seuss's head and his design style, which is just so unique and just kind of unique is doesn't even start to, like, his design style is so interesting and beautiful and complex but simple, and like all of these things that you've never, like, nothing else is like it. And so trying to get your head and your, you know, sort of your creativity kind of to be in line with that visually is, it's a lot of work, but it's really, really challenging. And then on Grinch, I was doing a lot of design work, but I was directing it also. And so then you're getting into like, what is the story that he's trying to tell? And then of course, you know, when you're designing a film, it's the same kind of thing. You're trying to get into the kind of state of mind of like, okay, how do we communicate this story to the audience? But directing is it's like that on every single front. And so so that was it was this, after all of these films, adapting other people's material and really caring a lot about,
really investing in,
because what you want when you're doing a film like this is for, it's like if the author were able to sort of walk in the room or see it projected, you want them to think like, wow, that's something that, you know, you hope to make them happy with your work, right? You hope to kind of honor them and make them, and of course you have no idea whether they would actually like it, of course, but what your goal is to make them think, wow, because of course we're going to change it, add things to it, because it's a new medium. It's a new, like, there's that you can't do the identical, you can't just film book pages, right? You have to sort of have a dimensional expression and have actors and have, you know, sort of, you know, time passing or watching characters, music, all of these different art forms that are coming into making an expression of a book, right? And so I think all of this is to say, all of the years that I've done this, it really kind of put this desire on my heart and Carrie's heart, because I'd come home and talk to her about it, and we'd kind of, you know, brainstorm together on ideas and stuff like that all the time. Put this desire in our hearts to tell our own stories, and of course we did Very First Noel, and we'd written, you know, some scripts and kind of developed some projects together. But even like Very First Noel was, you know, the stories from the Bible, and so it was
adapting something.
It was adapting. It was telling somebody else's story, right? And so we really, you know, we ended up thinking like, hey, let's try our own, you know, story. And so during that time in Paris, and actually backing up, we had the idea for Superworld
right before moving to
Paris. We had, like Carrie said, we'd done this sci-fi project, and we really enjoyed that. We really enjoyed writing a whole, you know, film together. And so we thought like, okay, what's the next thing? And I had this idea one day about,
you said it was actually a visual.
Yeah, it was this visual of that just kind of came to my, you know, into my mind's eye, of a character that was just kind of this normal guy, this kind of, you know, nothing special, just kind of everyday. And I kind of saw him as like maybe early 20s, this guy who was being held in the arms of some big, huge, you know, Superman kind of superhero.
Sort of cradled.
Yeah, like a little baby, like he'd just been saved from something. And then having just a sea of millions of superheroes all around him, looking at him like they wish they were the ones that just saved him, right? And the title, Superworld. And so there was this visual concept of one guy who's the only person in the entire world who's not a superhero, and everyone else in the whole world has superpowers. Not only has superpowers, but they want to. It's like if in our world all of a sudden overnight we had superpowers, a lot of us would put on costumes, but most of us wouldn't, right? It would be like, oh, it's more like magic, you know, I can fly now. I wouldn't necessarily fly in lycra and spandex or whatever. but in this case, the idea is that not only does everybody have superpowers, but they actively want to be superheroes with those superpowers. And
They want to play.
So basically, it's like the idea is this one normal everyday guy in a world full of superheroes that are always waiting for an opportunity to, change into their super suits and either save him, or super battles are happening all the time. They're breaking out everywhere. But what's it like being this guy who's the only one who can be saved in the world, and the only one who can break in the world? Because, watching superhero movies and even historically, it's like comic books, superheroes don't tend to break very easily, right? You can throw them through buildings, you can stomp on them, with giant robots, and they kind of usually have a little scratch or something like that, but they always bounce back. And so, but this guy is like us, like he trips on a sidewalk, he can break his arm, right? Like he can get burned or crushed or whatever, and he can die in a world where nobody can die. And so that was kind of the initial spark. And we started.
Well, and you even had the slogan, because he walked into the room and just pitched the idea. He's like, what if there was one guy in the whole world who didn't have superpowers? SUPERWORLD. And I said, what? Where did that come from? And then he said, I pictured this image and the tag, I'm so sick of superheroes. And that to us was like, wait, there's something in that.
Yeah.
And this is pre-Avengers. So we thought, isn't everybody getting kind of sick of superheroes, even though we love them and we go to every Spider-Man movie, every Superman movie, but we thought it's oversaturated, right? People are going to get sick of it. And then right after, like 2 months later, Iron Man came out and it's like the birth of every new, 20 new movies.
Right. So back then we were thinking, we better, if we're going to develop this, we better jump on it, because people will get sick of it. And it'll be, Westerns will be the big thing for the next, 5 years. But it turned out that it was just at the beginning. And of course, now it's superhero movies and stories are just so it's such an entrenched part of our experience, storytelling experience, and story watching or reading experience. So it only sort of became more and more appropriate. Like this story became just more appropriate to our experience in the world, because one of the things that we kind of play with is this idea that, like, is that the fatigue, right? The oh my gosh, it's another Marvel movie. I can't keep up with them. In our case, like Noah, this is our main character, Noah. He's our, so fast forward, this is the book form of our idea, but he's the only person in a world that it's an absurd world, but it's also a really cool world. Like everybody is there is really cool stuff happening all over the place, but it's kind of overwhelming. And so that's kind of what we're playing with as lovers of the genre, but also it can be like so much that we're sort of dramatizing that
and that he just kind of longs for the old world. So Noah just sometimes wishes his friends would just be normal again, and they could just do, like, just watch ET. Like, just hang out, just play D&D or something like that. Like not always be super. And
because all of his friends are super too, right? And so when he gets together with his friends, they don't want to just hang out and play video games. They want to
save them.
Yeah. So like the title of the book is SUPERWORLD Save Noah, and what that term in. The first time you hear that term is in the very beginning, where his friends get together and they play this game called Save Noah, where basically they put him through this battery of life-threatening situations so that they can save him as their superhero, alter egos. And so it's this thing where, like, he is willing, because he likes hanging out with his friends, he likes them, that they're a great little set, but he'll do that. He'll let them, save him over and over and over again, as long as they can go and watch a non-superhero movie and
just have
eat
pizza.
popcorn and pizza and whatever it is, and do the things that he used to do before the world, went super.
Yeah.
And so that was, so to back up, we had developed it we were starting to develop it as a feature film, and then the illumination happened and we moved to Paris, and over the next 10 years, we'd kind of put it on the shelf, but we'd take it down and develop it. And sometimes we would, I'd get up in the early before going to work, and we'd sit there and develop it, just try to explore the story and all of that. But over the years, we never really kind of had the best expression of it. And we kind of knew it. We thought like, oh, this is such a fun idea. We want it to be right. And it wasn't until after we moved back home to the States in 2018 that we started thinking of it. We were talking to our agents and about we were thinking, hey, let's do a book, and we were thinking maybe doing a picture book, and we weren't thinking about SUPERWORLD at all. We were talking to them, and we pitched a picture book, and it was kind of this fun little educational kind of a thing that I guess that our literary agent in New York, he had this, he's like, hey, let's get on the call. And he's like, basically, there isn't really any market for what you guys
what were the idea we're pitching.
Yeah. And so he's like, he basically said, like, do you guys have any other stories? And he kind of walked us through the book,
because we don't know the book industry at all.
Yeah, right. So, we were kind of, we had this idea just completely as non-participants in, we were thinking, we'll take our movie, our movie minds and kind of apply it to books, and it's a very different space, right? And so anyway, he asked, do you have any other projects that can be. And he explained, okay, picture books are kind of like this, and middle grade, and initially we were thinking like middle grade books, that's like a real book, meaning like
that has words.
Yeah,
we can't do that.
But then we started thinking like, what, we have SUPERWORLD, and we it's something that really we love, and it's something that I guess when we started thinking about how it would apply to a middle grade novel, it started firing off all of these ideas, because what better expression, what better time in life can you sort of have a character that feels the most unsuper, right? It feels like the whole world has all of these powers, but
everyone's special but me.
Yeah, everyone's special but me.
And everyone else has control but me.
Yeah, and so then we start thinking of I think of me in 7th grade, which is probably if I had to rate all of my years, I think that was probably the worst time I had in school, and it just felt like it started clicking for us that our main character, our protagonist, he should be a middle grade kid,
and not 25. He should be 12.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And because he's in this unique position in life where it's like he's not a kid anymore, right? And so he wants to start living his own life, but he's also, everyone else still has control over him. His parents, his teachers, he can't drive, he can't vote, he can't whatever it is, he can't do all the adult things yet, but at that age, you are starting to, you're not just happy having play dates anymore and playing with your toys. You start wanting to explore the world, but you're not there yet, right? And so it really kind of felt like the perfect fit for our protagonist to make him
it made more sense.
Yeah.
And because all of a sudden we're like, well, so his grandmother is super, his little sister is super. It just changed the idea. You have to go to middle grade with that situation, like middle school, that's the worst. Like you've already got cliques and bullies and you don't dress right and you're not cool. But what if even your teachers are superheroes? And I don't know. So
Yeah.
It caught fire, and we put together a pitch and we sent it to our agent, and he's just like, where did this come from? And he said, what happens next? And we said, we don't know. So he said, well, get busy. And that sort of 3 years later, we got busy.
Yeah.
So why is a middle grade book the perfect medium for this as opposed to a graphic novel or a film? And how does that change your approach to the story?
I think the one of the things that was really nice about telling a story in a novel form is that we got to kind of, it's a very fast-paced story, but you get to slow down a little bit, compared to film, where you have to, every single frame has to visually move the story forward in a way that you really feel, whether it's a slow or fast sequence or scene, you're in real time, right? And you're watching, you're sort of experiencing the story, watching people rather than getting in somebody's head. And I think we really appreciate the opportunity to sort of get into Noah's head. He's telling us the story, and to I don't know. It's like,
and I think we didn't want to go graphic novel with it. I think just because it's sort of, I guess, we wanted to land somewhere halfway between almost a graphic novel and a film. And so it needed the prose, I guess, and visually, as a production designer, I think we just wanted to explore the spreads in a different way so that they're kind of cinematic. Like there can be just, we didn't want the dialogue bubbles and the words quite the same way. I think just for us visually.
I think, because the excuse me, the book is very heavily illustrated. So like almost every single page or spread has artwork, so you can kind of see everything is, there is a sort of graphic novel sense to it, in that it's just packed with artwork, but we really wanted to tell a very full and deep and longer story. Not to say that you can't do that with a graphic novel, but we really just fell in love with the way that you can tell a story as a book, and really kind of get into the world building aspect and get into his psychological state and his emotional state in a way that's much more difficult to kind of pack, because we have, the world is a huge kind of deep, world with we have lots of characters, and we have lots of kind of aspects to the world that we're able to write about and support with images that we would only be able to kind of glance, sort of like very briefly touch on in a film. So I don't know. I think it's a good question, because I don't know. Well,
the style of how this turned out evolved as we developed it. So and with our editor, she would say, we're sort of finding this as we go, because of the style of the visuals, because we didn't go graphic novel, but we wanted boxes for our text. And we wanted Yarrow to be able to do some spreads that were, just a close-up of eyes. And we wanted some where he did multi-panels and put just like a jillion little drawings, which feel very graphic novel. Yeah. But it wasn't one thing. It was kind of, you turn the page and then it's just black. It's nothing. So it sort of was an organic process of what it turned into.
We had never done this before, right? So this is our first book, and so kind of coming at it from the filmmaker's perspective, because what we really wanted to do is make something that was immersive. It makes something that, growing up, I wasn't a reader, Carrie wasn't a reader. We begrudgingly read our books and did book reports, but we were so visual, and I think we wanted to make something that we would have really kind of wanted to read as a kid, and so that's
yeah, that is behind it. Actually, it was, we kept thinking, instead of, like you're saying, picking kind of exactly like what we were aiming for, it was sort of, what if we were walking in a bookstore, what would we have picked up and thought, well, I could read that. I'm not, my brother would always sit in a chair and read the Dragon Riders of Pern or something like that. He was always reading, and I was always, I want to go outside. I want to go outside and play, or I want to draw. But if I picked up this, and same with Yarrow, we thought, I think in the bookstore following my mom around, I would have said, well, Mom, can I have this one? Because it has visuals kind of everywhere.
Yeah.
And it would have given me a little bit of confidence that maybe I'm a reader too.
Yeah, it's almost like you want to give them the thing that makes them want to look at the page, and then they can get the benefit of reading the story. And I think, I think I would have been tricked into reading a book.
Right, we're trying to trick them. We're trying to trick them into reading.
So
it's such a beautiful book, but I also love that it's a big book, and so you sit down and somebody sees you holding such a big book, like, wow, look at how much reading they're doing.
Right?
Yeah, because there's so many beautiful visuals, you can read it fast, and you'll be thinking, look at what a fast reader I am. I'm amazing at this.
That's the goal. High five, Rob. High five.
That's exactly what we talked about. Like it does give you this sense of accomplishment, because there is story that you're reading, but you're also sort of like, taking in the visuals. One of the things that we really wanted to do is make it feel like you're sort of in a movie, in the sense that you feel like, whatever the illustration is, you feel like you're able to sort of like fill in, like, I don't have an example, but like you can fill in the stuff around it. It's like, here's some examples of some panel, a panel page where you kind of feel like, okay, there's action going on beyond my periphery, and you kind of feel like you're sort of right there in the action, but the story that you're being told is you're reading it. And so it was this, what we really wanted to do is make it a book experience, a reading experience that you could almost, have this, that you felt like you were in the story,
right,
from a sort of sensory point of view.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes any sense, but
what's interesting is that when we're like getting friends or family writing to us saying, hey, I gave it to somebody for Christmas, or I just bought this for my niece or my nephew, or my 12-year-old just read this, they keep telling us, again, it took us years. They're like, they sat down and read it cover to cover. And we're like, what? And then like, where's the next one? We're like, we're working on it. It's like, how long it took to make that thing? But so it's a funny reaction, because at first you think, no, don't read it like that, like slow down. But then we think, wait, that's really cool to be told that a kid like
spend their whole day just
or whatever it took them. Maybe they're a lot faster than us. But that they read it in one sitting is really neat to hear, because it means it's accessible, and it means a reluctant reader, it can get into it. And because that's even some of the stories, as my kid who doesn't read, like read it cover to cover, and we're just like, well, on, because like,
that's amazing.
Like you said just a few minutes ago, we want to empower those kids so that they're proud of the thing that's a little bit thick on their desk. Right. They're like, I vanquished that.
Well, it's so art-centric that after they've sat down and they did the 1,000 miles per hour read, like Johnny Five and Short Circuit, they get through it immediately, but then they can go back and they can savor the artwork, they can enjoy it slowly, and because they know the story, they could take their time and maybe better appreciate it.
That's the hope, because we do, we tried to pack it with a lot of stuff that will be more apparent on repeat reading and viewing. It's one of the things that like we did it illumination with our films there, where we really spent a lot of time putting things in the background. So like, you know, you can always find little stories that are happening in the background. You're watching the film, but we knew that a lot of people would watch our films multiple times, and to put little, you know, you can actually track a little, you know, minion story happening in the background sometimes, or, you know, things
right, stuff you wouldn't notice unless you were like really looking in the right corner.
Right. And it really gives a depth to the films that people really enjoy. And so we kind of do, you know, we tried to sort of do the same thing with the book.
So because Yarrow, you know, illustrated this thing for months and months, but there's so many images, but this is a multi-panel one that is one of my favorites.
This one took months and months.
This took forever, but out of the whole, so like on this one, it's like the kids have been successful as a super team, and just this one little image right there is a book, and one of the characters has his own memoir, and it's supposed to look like Steve Jobs, like the Steve Jobs book, and it says my humongous memoir. And I think, I don't know if anyone's going to spot that, but that's one of my favorite things in the entire book. And then the other one is Joy is in the window in this picture. Just that little head is out of the whole book. I always tell Yarrow, I think this might be my favorite thing in the whole book. So hopefully, like you said, hopefully people will look at it again.
Yeah,
that's the dream.
Well, of course, when you're working on a film, I assume you've got the upside that you can play the exact music that you want the hot audience to hear while it's happening. You've got Andy Griffith narrating. You've got Benedict Cumberbatch, however Mr. Cumberbatch,
Yes.
work. I don't know how to say your name, but you've got him doing an incredible performance. But when it's you've got an entire team behind you, but when it's just the two of you and an editor, I mean, how many people go into this book, and how does that change your approach for how you collaborate together?
Just Michelle Nagler, our editor, the three of us.
It's been
so different.
It's been a really amazing experience, because like you said, on a film, you're working with hundreds of other people, other artists. And that's the beautiful thing about working on films, but also a very difficult part, you know, when you're trying to sort of steer this ship that has all of these different creative, you know, every artist, like, you know, you have your own vision, right? If you work on a film, you're going to want to, you see it in a very unique way, right? You see it, or, you know, any creative endeavor, and that's the strength, right, of being an artist. It's like artists they're visionaries. They see the world in a certain way, or they see a project, a world that they're creating in a certain way. And as a viewer or a reader or a listener, what you're looking for in consuming other people's art, you want to see what they have to say about something. You want to see their vision. That's the fun of being, being an audience, is to see someone else's vision. Oh, I'd never thought of that way. I'm feeling something that they want me to feel that I hadn't sort of, you know, felt before. And so where were they going?
Well, so basically, the pros and cons of if you bring together, if you bring together a team, everybody brings their art into it, which can really elevate the project, right? Like the music, or the actors, or the editor, or sound effects, or anything.
Like all of these elements
come together to make something really rich.
But on the other hand, it can be very difficult, because when you're making a film, you don't want the audience to come in, sit in the theater, and feel like they're seeing 300 different movies all jammed into one. And so you sort of have to sort of corral all these ideas and try to get the best and most sort of cohesive version of all of this artwork to put forward. And
put forward one vision.
And what that means usually is a lot of cutting stuff out, right? It's like when you're doing these films, you have lots of ideas and you try to put it in, and you know, through time constraints or through just, you know, different pressures from different places, and just the massive amount of input you're getting, you have to whittle away, and what you come up with at the end is sort of this composition of what you hope is the best of the best, and the most cohesive and emotional, and the things that will hit with the audience. It's very tricky. With this, on the other hand, it's just us, right? And so it's us sitting, taking walks, driving around, coming up with ideas. And it's similar in that we come up with lots and lots of ideas, and then we have to start whittling those down. But
we're the only cooks in the kitchen.
And of course, like that's an amazing thing where you don't have to worry about notes from the studio or producers or all of these, or hey, the animators have this idea and we know that it's awesome and funny, but it doesn't totally fit, and how do I tell them that that kind of stuff, the cooks in the kitchen thing, where it's like you're trying to not make something that's more watered down because of all the input. You want to end up with something that's elevated because of all of this input. But when it's just us, we can spend all day long just kind of coming up with the ideas and discussing it, and so I think that's the biggest. We've
really loved it.
Yeah,
it's been a very fulfilling experience these last couple of years, getting to do something, and our Christmas project was the same, and that we just developed that by ourselves for so long that is.
And we sort of fell in love with
purely the story we wanted to tell, the words we wanted to use, like all of that, and that was such a cool experience. And this is like the second time we've gotten to do that, and we're kind of addicted now. We're hooked.
Yeah.
So we can look forward to DESPICABLE and other books.
Yes.
Yeah. You sure?
Do we have an update on when we can look forward to DESPICABLE?
Well, we're working on it right now. We just sent the first draft. So one of the I think kind of interesting things about this book is that it started out as a much longer book, right? And so we were, I guess, when we finally did with rough illustrations, we sent it to Michelle, and it's sort of like, okay, here's our first our first like version of the book,
whole thing,
of the whole thing together. How many pages was it?
570 something.
Right. So
and she's like,
right. She's like, we can't. There's not enough paper. Well, I mean, so yeah, it was massive, and so she said, hey, she was looking at it and said, what about, and Carrie and I had talked about splitting it into 2 books.
Because it was so long. We're like, this is 2 books.
And we always sort of, there was in that original version, there was sort of a midpoint that we thought, okay, well, if we split it, it would sort of have to be there. But what that meant was that the first book wouldn't really have an ending. It wouldn't have a story.
It was going to be very unsatisfying.
And so she came back to us and said, hey, how about, I was thinking about maybe making this 2 books. And independently, she thought that because of the length and but then she said, what if we split it right here?
More like 2/3.
Down. And it hadn't occurred to us that's where we could have split it. We just thought like, oh, you just cut it in half, right? But what that gave us was this really great ending and something that set up the next story.
Right.
And not only that, but it gave us all the stuff that we had for basically the act 3 of the original book, that everybody kind of felt like we were rushing through it because the world that we're talking about there's so much fun stuff to be had and to be seen and to be experienced in that world, that now breaking that off into its own book, we can actually
explore,
give it its due, give it what have all the fun that we can with it. And so
right. So we knew where the story was going, because the book 2 is what we thought was going to be book 1. So we're just getting to go into it more. And so we're getting close to finishing the first draft of the manuscript. And we'll just see how that goes with Michelle.
Yeah.
And then Yarrow will draw.
Yeah. It'll probably, I mean, it's probably going to take, because I haven't really done very much. I've done some concept artwork and a lot of work from the first version of the story, but it's going to be probably 5 or 6 months of drawing and to get this ready.
When it's a collaborative effort like that, and you're doing the artwork, is Carrie over your shoulder going, no, draw it more like this, no, change that?
Right.
Or
I'm more like, keep going. What can I get you? Do you want some coffee? Like, and then I'm like, I won't be back. Yeah. And it's so fun because I kind of get out of the way, but then I get to be the first audience. And so it's really cool because we've collaborated for so long. I'm a trustworthy audience. And I usually just love whatever he does. I'm his biggest fan. I've always been, but I also am able to say, I don't totally get that one. And we're able to talk about it, and then he'll adjust the artwork. But it's really fun because I think I know what the project is, but I don't until he has done the visuals.
Well, yeah, because it's an interesting thing because we talk about everything, and I'll do some like little sketches about, hey, what about this kind of a thing for this character, or a really rough version of a set piece or something like that. But for the most part, we do all of the writing ahead of time, and so before I start doing artwork, and so we both start visualizing it in our heads.
But he's right and I'm wrong.
But but the fun thing is to like, I know, okay, Carrie has an expectation of what something is going to look like, or a visual sort of expression of whatever it is, a character or a set or some sort of an action sequence or whatever. But because I know that she already has an expectation, my job is to surprise her and to give her something a little bit, hopefully more than what she's expecting. And so that's always the goal. And what that does is it kind of keeps the pressure on me to kind of keep digging if something isn't all the way, where if it's sort of good enough, it's not good enough, because what I want,
he wants to surprise me.
I want a reaction out of Carrie. And that goes for the writing as well. It's like when we hand work back and forth between each other, we're looking for that reaction it's beyond what they were expecting. So of course we know the story. When I give something to Carrie, she knows she's already done work on it. We've discussed it, talked it through, outlined it. But what I'm trying to do is give her a little bit more. And so that's kind of, I think, one of the fun things about working together is that you have this sort of built-in audience that you are trying to give an experience to. And so
well, of course, I assume when you work on a big film like The Grinch, you're going to have a moment where there's a premiere and you can go and you can sit in the back and you can watch the audience watch the movie, and they're laughing at the right spots. And you smart people making Christmas shows, you get to see that again every year. Whereas with a book, you can't. Both of you just sit there and stare at the person reading the book and make sure they're laughing at the right spot. So how do you get to have a comparable experience where you've reached your audience and you hit the mark?
Well, so interesting. Okay, so it is, I guess our process is that we brainstorm together, we outline together, and then through trial and error, we've determined it's best if I take the first pass at the chapters, just because it suits my mind and my skill set. And so it's like, well, okay, I'm going to take all this stuff we have and I'm going to, what we call, put up the 2x4s. And so I try to make it make sense with everything we talked about. And I build the chapter, and it'll be like, he enters the room. I'm like, well, what does that mean? And so I have to think, how does Noah get into the room? I don't know. So I write my pass and I try my hardest, but I know this is not going to exist. The next time I get this back from Yarrow, everything I've written will be gone. but I put the 2x4s together and I say, okay, chapter 1 is ready for you. I'm moving on to chapter 2. And he takes chapter 1 and he starts doing his Yarrow thing to it. And he's like an idea factory. I am not. It's a gift. He's been that way since I've ever known him. I'm like, you are just an idea factory. Where do these things? That's where SUPERWORLD came from. The idea factory. But, I don't walk in the room and say, what if there's one guy in the world who has superpowers? He says that. But when he tells me days later, okay, I have a chapter for you, it's that he actually he'll walk into the room with the chapter and he sits down and watches me read it.
Mhm.
So I don't watch him read my 2x4s because it would be very painful, because he would be just like, cool. Yeah,
Well,
it's
it's
like
like,
what we
yeah,
well,
it's a progressive,
right.
a progressive process.
It's not
So,
entertaining.
yeah.
It's not entertaining. So it's like you're looking at my wood slats. Who cares? But by the time he takes that he can look at that, and then the ideas fire off, and he's like, you know how we should tell that? You know what we should do? And he responds to it and invents all this new stuff that I have no idea about. And so then when he brings the laptop in and says, okay, chapter 1, I sit down, and it's usually kind of just around dinner time or something like
And we're
that.
usually trying to like, okay, get the last bits in before the end of the
dinner.
day so that I can.
Right. Even if it's taken 4 days, it's like somehow before dinner.
Right.
But he watches my reaction, and I read it out loud, and it's cold. I have no idea what it's about to say. And my reaction is the test audience.
Yeah, and I don't really tell her very much, on purpose leading up to that, because I want that honest,
Right.
like if it's if there's a laugh or something emotional, I can tell she doesn't have a poker face.
I don't have a poker face. I'm very experienced.
So anything that she's experienced, I can see on her face. And so, but that's what we want, is to get that honest reaction. It's exactly what you're talking about. And also, like you said, it's, from the movie business, it's not even that we go to the premiere. We actually have test screenings before
Months before.
Yeah, where we're finishing up the movie, but it's not done yet, and we play it in front of audiences that watch it, and we can actually sit in the back of the room, and we see what they're responding to and what they're not. And so,
and they take notes, and
because on films, you're working on it for years, and things that were fresh and funny or interesting or emotional, 2.5 years ago, at this point, you're just like, I don't think this is working. This isn't funny anymore. This isn't emotional.
They're just sick of it.
Yeah. And we're just kind of like, this whole movie's nothing works. Nothing's funny. It's because it's like, imagine telling yourself, telling yourself the same joke, if you're writing the same joke every single day in animation, you're seeing the same scene, probably you've seen every single shot 100 times at least, because you're seeing it in, on the page, you're seeing it storyboarded, you're seeing it, cut into reels more than 100 times. You're always working on it. It goes through layout, it goes through animation, it goes through, your effects, you're looking at lighting, compositing, and that's not even, like recording the actors and all that kind of stuff. So you're seeing the same thing over and over and over and over again. So you have no objectivity at the end. And so you sit at the back of the room, and all of a sudden people are laughing at things that you forgot were funny again,
or they're not laughing.
You're like, we thought that was going to kill, and it was just a dead room. And so then you have to go back and be like, okay, we got to lose that.
So they actually, in animation, they adjust the films before they're released, before they get to the premiere, based on the test screenings, and they survey the audience, like, what's your favorite character, what's your least favorite character,
right? And there's a person that actually facilitates a conversation. You just hear
after
people,
the screening.
You just hear people talking about the film, and it's really interesting to have somebody else's sort of cold, they've never seen any of these characters before, they don't know the story, and to have them talk about your film from a fresh perspective is really, really interesting.
Like, imagine you could do that with your books,
Yeah.
if you, I mean, it's scary, right?
It's very scary.
Could you be really vulnerable? But like, what if you could do that and then have like 5 more months to adjust and rewrite? If you could like put 600 people in a room and then hear someone else questioning them about your book. If you like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
So we don't have that. So we just have me.
But yeah, but it is the kind of the process that we kind of simulate a little bit, because at the same time, you don't want too much input, right? So like, you don't want to be like, okay, like if you have a test screening, or if you did have, hundreds of people read your book and you got all of those notes back from all those people, and you tried to address all of their notes, thinking like, if I do everything that they said, it's going to make it better. It's not going to make it better. Like, it's going to make it wash, it's going to be watered down, and this sort of, it gets back to that point of trying to sort of direct the ship toward, one goal, making it one vision. The audience doesn't necessarily always know what they want, and it's not their job to know what they want. It's their job to experience something, and hopefully you're going to touch a lot of them with your art. But at the same time, you don't, what they're sort of paying the price of admission or the price of the book, what they're paying for is to get something that they've never experienced before. It's like, that's what you're giving them, is something new, right? And so you can't do that necessarily if you're taking 1,000 ideas from from other people and trying to
corral them,
because then you'll get something that is a little bit more just not news. It's sort of more kind of what we've seen before. And so I think that's kind of one of the nice things about just having us to bounce things back and forth between, because I trust Carrie, she trusts me,
right? And we trust Michelle,
like
our editor has the same sense of humor, I guess. And so if she is like, laugh out loud, we're like, yes, like Michelle thought it was funny.
Yeah, she's definitely, because between us, we obviously we know everything about our story because we talk about it every single day. But she is the kind of the first person that is reading it cold, and so that's incredibly valuable also. So
an audience of 1 to 2.
Yeah, but I think the strength of that is, okay, the downside is that you don't get to see every single thing, how a group of people react to it. But the upside is that I think at the end of the day, it retains the freshness of the story, of the ideas, of the expression, without necessarily compromising the accessibility. You sort of get a good balance between the two, I think. So I think that's what we've sort of appreciated about this process, rather than sort of the massive, more the massive machine that kind of goes into film. Yeah.
Well, I think that solves it. Leave Hollywood, focus exclusively on books from here on out.
Yeah, we are digging. I tell you what, we really have been. We really like the, I don't know, just this process and just what life looks like when you're writing a book together. Like it's just we really take into it. We just really enjoy it. So
let me ask you this hypothetical. A studio comes to you and says, we love Superworld, we want to make the movie, we don't want you involved at all. Is that something where you could stomach that, where you say, okay, we'll go, we'll take our checks, I guess?
Well, interesting you should ask or say that. We actually do have it's being set up with one of the big studios, and we are hopefully it will move forward, but it's being set up and to be developed, and we're going to write the first draft of the script. So that's going to be the involvement that was important to us, to get the first crack at the script,
the film expression of it.
And then I think you might consult. I think you might consult visually on it.
Well, it's right. It's something that.
Right.
Something that,
except they can just take the book. Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think we're gonna have to kind of find that balance, because we really enjoy telling the story this way. And I think that, we like I said, we really enjoy doing this. We want to keep doing this. And so so depending on how everything shakes out, I think we kind of see ourselves still doing this,
but it's also easy to say that now, and because I think after writing, it will also be like tempting to say, well, how do you walk away now, and not see the ship all the way, with directing experience and the animation experience. So we'll cross that bridge or ocean later. But for sure, this is where our heart is right now, is the source, being the creators of the source material.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's been, getting back to our original sort of desire to tell our own stories. I think that gets back to that kind of core desire for us, is that, is just being the people who, putting together the stories that can go on to do other things potentially, but generating the source material, generating those ideas. I think that's what we really enjoy, and so I think that's I think what we're going to keep pursuing. I think so.
But it's cool to think about other iterations of this, and that going back to the prose side of the argument of, well, other people will start bringing their gifting to telling this, and that's like really cool, like other visual artists, other musicians, editors.
Yeah, because there's so much. What we really tried to do, it's a very big world, and we have a lot, of so many characters and so many things that I think as an artist that isn't us, right? I think this is something, if I had nothing to do with Superworld, I think, and I was working in, entertainment and whatever, and had an opportunity to do work on this, I think I would be like, this is amazing.
Because you would want to bring your
I would enjoy exploring. Like, it's one of those things where we made a story in a world where we hope that would draw other creative people too, and in a way
that they would want to make it their own.
Yeah, that they would want to like play around in it and sort of extend it. And so that's been our goal in terms of a kind of the kind of a story that
because we know what it's like to work in studios, and you don't usually choose what you're put on. It's like, hey, this project's being made, and it's your privilege to get to work on that.
Especially early on, when you're like, when we were just coming out of school, it's like we were just so happy to have a job in animation, and sometimes you'd work on a film that you love. Other times you'd be like, this isn't the best thing, but it's fun, it's a job, it's cool. But what we really would love to do is make something that
people want to work on.
Well, and like our publisher, like we want anybody at Random House to be like, oh, I want to do this for Superworld. And I want to, it's like we want everyone who has any kind of a stake in it to really have the joy of working on it. And so that's always been our goal. So yeah.
So even if a wise studio sage made you both, granted you absolute power, your directors, your producers, you have everything, you're still going to have to open up to collaboration for the people that come in, unless you play every role yourself.
That will be if the film and all that kind of stuff goes, that will 100% be big old collaboration. So we will open our hearts and minds back to that, and the benefits of it, and then we'll hide here to work on book 2.
Well, I'm watching our time, and it's flown away. Where does it go? But something that it occurs to me, you're in a unique position to ask. You might be the only person I'll ever be able to ask this question. In terms of being intimidated to work on a project, is it more intimidating to approach the Grinch when there's a Boris Karloff, Chuck Jones version that's already beloved, or to work on the Three Wise Men, where it's literally from the Bible, and many people feel it's actual history? Which one is more intimidating?
That's a good question. I think it's similar. They're both very, very similar. So like you said, from the Bible, because we're Christian, there is a responsibility to not sort of undermine, like if we're going to tell the story, and of course we told it in a way that it's our expression of it, and it's told in a way that is sort of reminiscent of the old stop motion, Rankin Bass films. everything looks like, our kind of concept was to make it as if you were going into a little nativity set underneath a Christmas tree and telling the story that way. So there's that kind of starting point. But we really tried to, like we said, we did a version of it, a feature version. We wrote a feature version that was just terribly off, and the reason why we shelved it was we thought
it wasn't.
This isn't true to the core of the story. And so when Carrie rewrote it from the ground up, what she did was she just went right to the source and to Matthew and Luke and wove together the story that was very faithful to the events. And then of course we like our little sense of humor's in it and stuff. But I even I looked for public domain Christmas songs and carols, and I just like kind of read through them just for thoughts, like It Came Upon a Midnight Clear, Angels We Have Heard on High. And I just had some of those, and we love Christmas our whole lives, and I love those songs. And so that stuff was in my mind, plus the scripture. And to me, it was a very big deal to try to honor the material and to be true to it, while still like having shepherds meet the wise men. Did they really? No, but we took some creative license. It's possible. Well, one of the interesting things is that the sort of traditional timeline of the three wise men showing up on the night that Jesus was born. That isn't really right. And so they actually probably ended up,
within 2 years,
within a couple of years of, when they saw the star.
But everybody's Christmas pageant and everybody's nativity set has them all there the same night.
So it's like, okay, that's the one thing that we're like, okay, but at the same time, it's still possible. We put the little drummer boy in there.
Oh, right. See, creative license,
not canonical, but so anyway,
I would say Grinch is secondary, like just because we're talking about faith and the material.
But it's very similar, but it's also a little bit different in that what you're trying to, I guess there is a lot of similarities, because what you're trying to do is honor the material, right? You're trying to like I said, you're trying to do something that if Dr. Seuss walked into the room and saw what you were working on, no matter what you were working on, he would be like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I hadn't seen it this way necessarily, because of course, it's more work being done on their story that they've never had any input on, right? And so other than the core. And so you're always aware that anything that you add to it is not the original, but what you want to do is make it feel like it's related. And so what you don't want to do is contradict, right? You don't want to make something that would make the original author unhappy, in the sense that you think that, like, you think about the Lord of the Rings films, right? Like those films were incredible, and of course they took creative license, they changed storylines and things like that, but you also look at them and you think, like, there is such fidelity to so much of what Tolkien had kind of put into his Middle Earth and his characters, that you would think that, like, hopefully if he saw those films, that he would feel like, okay, this is another story, but I really appreciate that they are honoring these aspects of what I told originally. So that's kind of the goal. But yeah, there is a pressure that you're always aware of, like, it's always there, but it's also a good pressure, because it's also, when you're adapting something like that, you have all of this material, and with Dr. Seuss you have books and books and books, and so where it's sort of like the Jurassic Park dinosaurs, where they're like, okay, we take this gene that we got out of this mosquito, but it's missing all these pieces, so we can take these genes from frogs and stuff like that and fill it in, right? So, like, with Dr. Seuss, he's got the Grinch, or the LORAX, but in going through the Grinch, trying to expand it out into a whole feature film, which is much, much longer. And like you said, with the Chuck Jones version, which was just brilliant. And one of the, it's one of the things that Carrie and I talked about our first day at Cal Arts. Such a brilliant expression of the Grinch, and one that Dr. Seuss was actually involved in, right? Like he wrote on it, and he was part of that project. You think, okay, we're adding all of this stuff to it, we're extending the story. How are we going to fill in those bits? And it's not just a matter of like, okay, putting something in just to fill the time. It's how do you tell a longer version and a deeper, not deeper in the sense that it's more important or more like, but it's more like, how do we delve into the Grinch's personality, Cindy Lou's personality, who's a very small part of, important part of the book, but you don't really get a sense of her life, and Max, the little dog. Like, how do you sort of explore those characters, Whoville, all of the Who's, what's it like living there? So what you have with Dr. Seuss, you don't just have that book, you have all of his other books too. And so you can really kind of dig into how did he attack like these people here in this book, or this kind of a design thing here in this book. And so I was pulling reference from all of his other books to sort of like, get as much of a filled in world based on his original material as possible. And so that's the upside of working from materials, that you do have this sort of like wealth of information that is really fun to sort of to kind of synthesize and create that Jurassic Park dinosaur that is not the original, but feels like the original because it's got all the same pieces, I guess.
So the cat in the hat is basically amphibian DNA. I love this metaphor.
That's right. That's
Good job.
When you put it like, what if Dr. Seuss walks into the room? That does clarify for me, because, okay, well, Dr. Seuss comes in and unhappy, that's a devastating day. But if God comes into the room as
right,
that's a very
next level.
Yeah, well, and it's an interesting thing, because there's sort of this, because in putting together the three wise men, there is a lot of information. One of the things that we really enjoyed was like, okay, you have the gospel accounts, but then there's all of the historical, like, okay, who might the Magi have been, and who went, and there's a lot of information about first century, Jerusalem, and from like, there's a lot, like Josephus wrote all kinds of material about what it was like to live around that time, just after that, but basically around that time. And so there's a lot of information that, again, you're sort of able to kind of draw from, and things like, Herod and all of the sort of the political stuff going on there. But at the same time, so you pull all this stuff together, and then you make like little, are like little, sort of nativity set versions of these characters. But you really kind of feel this sort of the background, sort of source material. We hoped that kind of feeds into it and informs it and gives it a little bit more depth.
Well, he actually modeled the temple. So he's like, okay, I'm going to research like what was the scale in Jerusalem of the temple, and he would show me. He's like, do you realize how enormous this building was? And he built it. He built a model that you see like in a distant background shot, and it's like the wise men first see the city, and they're like, hey, what is that place? And the shepherds tell them that's Jerusalem, and so you see the silhouette of the temple, and that's the only time I think you ever see it in the whole thing. But to honor the material, he built it to scale.
And it's I mean, design wise, it's very different. Like I like Oliver Hills, they look sort of
they're like rolling.
There aren't any.
They're for sheep.
But they didn't put any trees. But it was sort of like I don't know. But yeah, it's interesting because like all of the versions of like of Bible stories that you watch, over the years, they are all kind of constrained to how many actors can we afford? What are the sets that we can afford? Most of the versions of of especially like, Jesus of Nazareth and things like that, sort of historically, you aren't actually seeing the scale and the scope of what the world was actually like back then. Like the Herod's, the temple in Jerusalem was it was like one of the wonders of the world. It was massive. Like it was, I think, 150 feet tall, marble, gold on the top. And it's something that's like, nobody puts that like usually if there's a scene at the temple, it's like you see some columns and a wall and maybe 30 extras or something like that. And it's like, what we're talking about, like during Passover, you would have millions of people coming into Jerusalem. And so it's one of those things where, like, when we started putting it together, and of course our version is again like the like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer version of that, but it is true, like we started putting some of this stuff just to see what the scales were, and it was very different than what we expected because
and when we actually have a shot, two or three shots in Jerusalem, our budget was this, and so we have like 6 characters run by.
It's the same thing.
we had the same constraints.
So, but one of the nice things about a book is that, as opposed to film, is that you can write anything, right? You don't have to worry about.
You don't have to budget for it.
Budgeting for a jillion characters, or hey, we want to do a set piece where this,
You could have your ants, the ants you talked about in that your colony, like that your main character goes up against. You can write 1 million ants,
right.
But if you do the script version, you're going to get in trouble, and they're going to say,
okay, how are we going to
you can have 50.
Oh, I guarantee I can get 1 million ants for cheaper than Andy Griffith. Now, can I get that? That's a different question.
Oh, this is so fun.
The esteemed audience knows I have to ask, because I ask everybody, whoever comes on the show, have either of you ever seen a ghost and or a flying saucer?
Oh, interesting. Not
Ghost
me.
or flying saucer? I don't know. I mean,
No.
I've never seen a flying saucer, certainly. I think ghosts, you sort of like, I don't know. I've never seen a ghost. Like, those are the most sort of credible in the sense that, like, you do hear people talk about things that were like, wow, there's no way to explain that, but I've never actually seen it.
And now I just want to know, have you?
Yeah, really. What's your...
No, I've never seen a ghost. I had a strange supernatural experience that esteemed audience has had before. That is not a middle grade appropriate story that I haven't found a way to share.
Okay.
Mostly because I was inebriated at the time, which makes it less credible. But I used to be far more of a skeptic before I started asking everybody who comes on the show about it. And I'm talking to authors and book people, the best people, and the number of amazing stories I've heard that have turned my head. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a lot more credible than I would have thought.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Fascinating.
It is one of those things where you're like, okay, I think if I had to be like, okay, that's probably not possible, but when you tell that story, I have no way of
disproving it.
They're disproving it, and
That's
it does sound, it is an interesting thing.
I mean, we saw what Mulder went through and Scully, my
Right?
goodness. Like, to bring them back into the conversation.
The tension alone. I've always maintained that the problem with that show is that as it progressed, it became harder and harder for me to accept that Scully was still a skeptic. Like, you see something amazing every week. Come on, Scully.
Yeah, more than any
probably aliens.
Right.
And she's like, no, it's probably not real.
Yeah, no, I'm not buying it.
So Gillian Anderson should have gotten extra acting awards just for pulling that off week after.
Totally. Like, I've been abducted and had an alien child, but I don't believe it.
There's probably a scientific explanation for this one.
Nice.
This has been an absolute delight. I so appreciate both of you being so generous with your time and
Sure.
and providing such amazing insight into storytelling. For today, my although you're going to write more books, so maybe we'll get together. We'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, that'd be great.
For today, my last question is always some variation of if you could go back toward the start of your career, middle of your career, wherever it would have been most useful, and given yourself some advice that would have made easier your path and might make easier the paths of everybody who's watching or listening to us, what would you go back and tell yourself?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, like, I don't know, do you have anything? But I mean, I think one of the things that may be useful, I guess, that I could have gone back, and I think it's really more of the something advice or encouragement that I would have given myself was that it's gonna be okay, in the sense that if you keep working at it, something will happen, right? So
yeah, that's interesting. So more like encouragement, like it's gonna be hard, but just don't ever stop, don't give up.
Right. And I think that's because so much, like, when you know, at this point in our lives, we've done lots of things and that can be looked at as, hey, that's pretty successful. You guys have done, you know, we have a book, we have, you know, we've worked on movies, we've done a lot of what we wanted to do. And I think,
but along the way, it felt like failure constantly.
Right. And that's the thing that you don't see. It's harder to see at the end of, not the end, hopefully this isn't the end of our lives, but you kind of see the high points, and sometimes you see the low points. But yeah, there's I think a tendency to say, like, hey, to emphasize all the achievements in anybody's life and anybody who's successful at anything, and not necessarily see how all of the difficulties that it took to get there. And I think the reason why it's good sometimes to sort of not to dwell on those, but to understand that they're there, is that when you're writing a book, right? Just to take one project, there are times when you think you hit the wall and you just like, I have no ideas, or I don't think this is any good, or it's I'm tired, it's exhausting, is it worth it? It's times like those, and that happens throughout life, on anything, especially things on a longer scale, right? A longer timeline. There's always the tendency to give up. Like that kind of comes with I think with most people. There's always that temptation. You know what? I don't know if this is ever going to happen, if I'm ever going to be a success in this, or, you know, and I think it makes people, it drives people to give up. And I think maybe the best advice we could probably give is that if you stick it out, because most other people will throw in the towel, right? And so if you don't, you're already ahead of those people, right? If you just stick it out, and maybe the thing you're working on won't be successful. Maybe whatever it is will be a failure, but it will probably lead to something else.
And it's still such valuable experience.
Yeah, and you know, as an example, like we said, after the Three Wise Men, we had wrote a sci-fi script. We pitched it around town, and we got some interest, but nobody actually, you know, we got an option, a small option, but it never went anywhere. But it was so that was sort of a failure. And we'd spent a year kind of learning the process and learning and pitching, you know, writing the script and pitching it and all that. It was the first time we'd done something like that. And so at the end of it, to have it be sort of a failure was difficult, but it was one of those pitches that left, you know, we'd left our materials at, you know, Illumination Entertainment,
a brand new animation studio,
right? And they're like, hey, well, we don't want to do your project because of this reason, but hey, we really like your work.
We need a freelance artist.
Yeah. And so I started doing that, and that led to Despicable Me. And so it's that kind of a thing where, how do we just given up on our sci-fi project? It wouldn't have led to the next thing. And I think that's the thing for anybody to really understand, is that whatever you do is going to lead to something else. It may not be exactly, it's almost never what you think it's going to be. Right. And that's an important thing to do, to sort of hold on to, is that you just want to keep at it and kind of let the and it's something that's related to it is this sort of, I don't know where I heard it, but this idea that, like, if you want to make sure that you catch a train, stand on the track, right? Because eventually it's going to come and you're going to be there when it does. And of course, you don't want to be run over by it. But at the same time, what you want to do is just keep being there, because so many, in terms of like, creative jobs, like creative work is difficult because so many people want to do it, because so much of humanity, like, we're all creative people, right? And it is something that there is a lot of competition in the sense that, like, lots of people want to do it, but if you want that to sort of materialize, like, one of our family members is an actor, and she's been working for decades and at being an actor, and she's a successful actor at this point. But it's like, you back up years and years and years, and it's like, she was out there hustling. She's like going where auditioning and talk about an industry where everybody wants to do it. Like, everybody wants to be an actor, where they want to be on screen. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff, it takes that grit to kind of stick it out and kind of put yourself where you need to be in order to sort of catch those breaks when they happen.
And endure the times that feel like utter failure.
Yeah, because so much of it is emotional. It's like, it's one of our greatest obstacle in so many ways.
For any artist is the heightened emotion you also experience. I was just a short note, writing what our feature that we tried was called Resident Alien, and that spending that year actually was kind of the only reason that we could try this, because when we thought, us write a middle grade novel, we have no clue how to do that. We thought, well, let's just kind of write it like we wrote the script. And so it's like sound effects, like we think of it, and our editor had to kind of help us and say, okay, you guys, but slow down. Like this, like you're writing it like it's a movie, which is okay, but slow down.
Very brief. What you're trying to do is actually write in, as people are reading, you want to time the writing as if they're reading in real time, a movie that they're seeing. And so when action has to be really, really fast, your action lines are, one or two lines, but when you want to slow down the pace, then you sort of lengthen that to sort of approximate what they're going to experience on the screen. So that's kind of the way that we did our first draft. And it was very sort of like, and I think a lot of that is still in there, because we really do like to pace the reader and have them experience the story from a pacing, the pacing that we want them to. So sometimes there are like one or two word lines just to kind of give them that sense of momentum, and then we'll slow things down and get things, but at the beginning we did a very, very sort of like movie scripty version of the book that didn't,
but it gave us the confidence to even try. So failing in 2007 at that process wasn't really failure. So
sneaky bonus question at this point, having felt like a failure so often, but now having had tremendous success in film, having had this tremendously amazing book that's out in the world and being enjoyed, being here on the Middle Grade Ninja podcast, do you at last feel successful? Not satisfied, but successful?
I think so. I mean, I think what, like, I think I'll,
Mhm.
I think just to answer for me, I
Yeah.
feel like to not feel like we're successful, like I think success at this point in life is more like when I look back and think of all the things that we were privileged to be able to work on, SUPERWORLD, like the fact that we were able to spend the time to, that it took to actually make this creative expression, this thing that we really was on our hearts. I think that to me is success. And I think we have more times than not really enjoyed the films that we've worked on and the projects that we've worked on. And I think that is just that is, I think I would say that that's a success.
Yeah. And I guess I don't, maybe to use a different word, it's more like a sense of peace, I guess. So, you go to school and you've got your dream and it's like, we want to work in movies and we want to draw and like, maybe we could have our own company and let's make the Christmas project. And I mean, that felt like failure after failure. 7 years, it took 7 years and it put us super far in debt that, we had to recover from. It's like, what have we done? But to finally get to kind of come back together after him working separately for 10 years in Paris and not getting to actively collaborate. I got to be behind the scenes as a collaborator with him, but I wasn't working with him. And to get like a kind of a chance to collaborate again on something that we can actually physically hold in our hand and say, it's like a real thing that we can see a little kid read, that it gives sort of a, okay, we got one more chance.
Well,
and it's like, if this is all we got to do, I think we would feel at peace. Like that was very satisfying.
Yeah, there is something, I mean, there's something really great about, putting all the work into something and actually having it contained in something that will live on beyond you actually having to keep working on it. Right. And so it's like, it can be, 10 years from now, somebody can read this book and get hopefully enjoyment and and get some, laughs or some, be touched emotionally by something that it's like we get to, as artists, we get to put all of that stuff into something that can actually keep living. And that's a very like,
it's a real privilege. Like, that's all your heart and your thoughts and everything went into that thing. And now that it is done and you have your book, it exists. It just exists. Like there's no, it's not this thing in the air that you haven't.
It's different. Also, there are other kinds of, creativity, like being a musician. I mean, a musician, you record your tracks and you can listen to them, but so much of that, it's sort of the live musician scene, because that's its own thing, right? And you do it for that audience, for that night, or for that song, and then it's gone, right? And because you can't record it and enjoy it, but that artwork that they do is, and that's kind of one of the great things about kind of live music, is that that's what your experience is the moment. But in books, in film, there is no moment. The moment is your story with the reader at whatever moment that is, through all of future history. And so that's a pretty cool thing. So
well, that's the great thing about podcasting. We get to have the moment, and I get to listen to it again many years now and enjoy it all over again. This, again, absolute thrill and a pleasure today. Where can the esteemed audience find you online, follow you on social media, and all that good stuff?
Barely.
We're
terrible.
I have an Instagram account, but I usually every couple of years I'll pop in and do an update.
We're terrible.
So we're really bad at that. I'm sorry.
This was it. Goodbye.
This is our
farewell, internet.
Thank you, Rob. This was it.
I mean, I don't know. Like,
we just haven't really done that much.
I have a website with some of my artwork.
yarrowcheney.com. If you want to see some Grinch artwork.
Some other stuff.
Despicable Me.
You can check that out. But
and that's it.
I mean, I guess Instagram if you want to, but probably the next time.
The short answer is the real answer.
I'm not going to be on that until the sequel is done. But then you'll be able to know when it's out. So So maybe that's a good answer.
That's why you're feeling that peace you were describing, because you're not on social media.
Exactly. It's very strategic.
Yeah.
As always, esteemed audience, for interviews almost as good as this one, with all the world's best people, book people, head to middlegradeninja.com. Go get your copy of Rob Worm's Bird Adventure. It will change your life. And God willing, I'm alive. I'll see you next week.